Well, first of all, I'd like to say good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Markup Madness. My name is Gustav Choto. I'm the head of customer success at Join, and I'm really excited about today's topic. We've been working hard to give you the ability to filter, allocate markups in Join by work breakdown structure. So this is something we've been waiting for and excited to show you. I'm also excited to be joined by a very special guest today, my colleague, Christina Landry. She's the head of product here at Join. Christina will be adding some additional commentary throughout the webinar, and she'll also be helping with the Q&A section of our webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to just get some housekeeping items out of the way. Everyone on the webinar is muted. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand in the app and post it. Christina and I will answer questions at the end of the webinar. Make sure to post your questions in the Q&A section and not in the chat section. And then Christina and I will be fielding these questions as they come in or hold them to the end. We'll also be recording this webinar and we'll post it to our help center in the next couple of days. All registered attendees will get the links once it's posted, and feel free to share this link with your colleagues. So today's webinar is on Markup Madness. In Join, markups are a great way to manage and carry below the line cost in your project. So in this webinar, we're going to cover best practices on markups throughout Join. We're going to also dive into the recent upgrade that I just told you about, applying markups with work breakdown structure. And we'll also be jumping into how to apply more precision to your item markups as well from inherited milestone markups. And we'll just provide tips and tricks along the way. If there's a new feature that maybe we stumble upon, I'll make sure to point that out for you guys as well. So our objectives for today are to understand how markups work in Join, learn how to apply markups for milestone estimates, target budgets, and items. We'll understand how to apply percent markups to control your cost. Learn how to apply markups with categorization, which is work breakdown structure. And then also take a look at how cost permissions work by role in Join. So for those of you that are somewhat new to Join, that are on this webinar, project teams use Join from pre-construction to construction to share budget trends and target value design via an online platform. So that's what we are, an online platform. So this allows all stakeholders to collaborate and participate, track and analyze on a project. And when it comes to markups, it's important to have the ability to have ultimate precision and flexibility. In the past, markups in Join were applied globally to the whole estimate and all items regardless of work breakdown structure. So we're excited to announce that shortly you'll be able to have even more precision with markups and filter and allocate based on work breakdown structures that you add to your markups. So before we get started in the product and the demonstration, I'd like to let everyone know that we're not going to do a comprehensive demo of Join today. So if you're not familiar with Join, please bear with us. And if you want to know more about Join or get a more comprehensive demo, please let us know and we're happy to schedule that for you. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into Join. So as I mentioned, we're gonna jump into the first thing is milestone markup. So we're gonna go into the milestone page, look at how markups work there, how they're shown in the milestone report. We're gonna look at how categorizations can impact markups. Then we will jump into items, show how items can be impacted by markups that are created in the milestone page. We'll show how we can copy paste and create quick markups in a new milestone. We'll go into the item detail page. We'll show best practices on how to create markups there or create global markups that affect your items. We'll also look at how to look at markups on and off within the product. And then we'll wrap up with a collaborators page to show you the different permissions. All right. So the first thing I want to do, since we're gonna show how to use the new feature that's going to be released soon, categorizing or creating markups with categorization, or also known as work breakdown structure. I'm going to go into the project tab and I want to create a categorization. Right now I have unit format, master format built in. I've also got a custom category called building scope, priority, and type. So I'm going to just really quickly create a category. I want to call it risk. And we're not going to use it right away, but I'm going to show you once we get into our item categorization how we can use this. So I'm going to call this one high, medium, low. Click done. Now that I've created that becomes available to me in my milestone report, also in my items. So I can tag and categorize my milestone report or items with that. So let's jump into our milestone page. Once you'll notice this is actually a new look here. Now when we bring you to our milestone page, we make the milestone report a lot more prominent. So let's go in there and let's take a look up where markups live within the milestone report. So let me collapse all. So when you're in the milestone report, if you scroll down to the very bottom, you'll see all the markups that are on this particular project. So in this project, in this milestone, we have fee, insurance, and contingency. And we can see how they're impacting our estimate, our budget, and what the delta is between the two. And then we can see the total markups that we have for this particular job. One just quick aside, as I mentioned, I'll be mentioning new features. We've got this new feature now where you can actually modify what columns you see in the milestone report. So keep an eye out for that once you're in. And we can also now show items in the milestone report, so you can pick which ones you want to see. So now that we've taken a look at where markups live within the milestone report, let's actually go in to the more background look of a milestone estimate. So now we're in the milestone estimate. So there's one way to get in here. I got in here right from the milestone report. If I land on this page, all I need to do is come here to this little side caret, and I'm in the milestone detail view. One thing to note, this is another somewhat new feature, is our description field. So you can add information about your milestone. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to expand my estimate. And I have my estimate here. I have unit format, master format, and building scope as the categories that are in this estimate. I have my total cost for each of those rows. And then down below that, I have my markups. So a couple of things about markups that are important to know. We have two types of markups. So I'm going to create let's create a markup here that, let's say I wanted to, I've got a bunch of buildings here. So I've got bathrooms, I got cafeteria, classrooms, gymnasium. And let's assume for a second that for some reason I wanted to mark up just the gymnasium for some reason. And I could do a lump sum, but what I want to do is a percentage. So as soon as I activate the percentage, I can say, hey, I want to add 5% to this particular one. And now I can reference this. So now I can say, well, what do I want it to be applied to? I can do it to S1, which will be to the subtotal. So it'll be direct cost. Or I can also add it to my project total or any combination of these here. So in this case, I'll just do it to the project total. And this here is the new feature. So right below our apply to, we're going to have some filter categories. We have unit format, master format, building scope. So as I mentioned, I want to add this only to gymnasium. So now what I can do is find the gymnasium, click that one, click off. And now what I've done is added a markup that is only going to be applied to costs that have been categorized with gymnasium in my estimate. So a couple of things to note here. When an item, this will filter down to items. So if I've tagged my markup as a type percentage, these markups are inherited by our items. And we'll jump into what that really means in more detail once we get there. But that's one thing to note. Lump sum markups are not inherited. Those just live here in the milestone estimate. So now before we jump into items, I want to add one more markup. I want to call it markup on high risk items. And I'm going to call this a percent. And let's say I want to add 3%. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply it to the project total and to high risk items. You're going to notice that I have a $0 markup here. This is not impacting my estimate in any way because I'm not using that particular category in my estimate. So what I'm going to do now, let's go over to an item. And let's say that this particular item is associated with my gymnasium. So I have two ways to be able to apply that markup to this particular item. Here on the risk, here over on the side panel on the categorization, I can apply this to high risk. So what you'll notice here, now I have a markup here of $1,245. And why this is important is now what you'll be able to do is go into items that you deem high risk and apply a markup that you've created in the milestone estimate. And why this is important is previously you could have just created a standalone markup here for this item. So just to be clear, I'm in an item right now. So I'm in the item estimate, and right below the item estimate, I can add a markup here. And I could have done it just this way. Could say percent 3, and then I can just apply it to everything. The problem with this, I mean, this is great if I only want to apply it to this one item, but if I want to apply it to a bunch of items, I would have had to do this individually. Now with with markups with categorizations, I can actually apply it more at a global level. I can even do it at this level. So I'm going to maybe add a column, and let's just assume that maybe this particular item encompasses more than just, so I have cafeteria, and then I want my gymnasium. So now you know my markup just changed. So you can have two levels of precision, either at the global level of the item, I can apply that markup, or I can even do it at the line item level. Say, for example, if this item maybe spanned multiple buildings in this project. So that is how our markups impact items. And I talked about this a little bit earlier. Down below are just our markups, we have inherited markups. So whenever you add a markup to your milestone estimate, and it is a percentage markup, it is inherited by your items. So I'd like to go back to the milestone detailed page, because this is something else new to markups. There may be times when you have created maybe 10, 20 markups in a project, and you want to create a new milestone. You want to transfer those milestone markups to a new milestone. Previously, you would have had to create those individually. Now what we can do is, say if I create a new milestone, and I'll call this a new milestone. Give it a date. Create and close. And what I'm going to do is I want to go back to my previous milestone. I can go ahead and copy and then go back to my new milestone and paste. Voila. So now the days of having to recreate each line are gone, and it actually will remember any categorization that you've added to that particular markup and all the applies to. So that streamlines that process now. All right. Okay, so now that we've given you an overview of markups in a milestone, markups in an estimate, I want to talk a little bit about how markups are shown in Join. You'll notice prominently here in the upper left, we have a section called Show Markups. There are times when you may want to hide your markups for whatever reason, and now we give you, or we've always given you the ability to do this. We've just changed the nomenclature, but essentially what you can do is you can display markups distributed throughout all your numbers in join, or we can just turn them off. So keep an eye, if you keep an eye here for a second, I'm going to shut them off for a second. And now our estimate total has dropped from 130 to 120. And that's not only reflected in this little dashboard, but it'll be reflected throughout join. So that's just something handy to have in your back pocket if for whatever reason you're in a meeting and you're in your own profile and you don't want markups showing. So let's take a look at how markups, on the topic of showing data and not showing data, we do have the ability to filter how collaborators on your project see markups as well. So I'm here in the collaborators page now. So let's take a look at our roles. So let's start with administrator role. We can look at administrator role as a God mode. So by default, we give you markups, can view, edit, and delete. Our general contractor is our second most powerful role, and that role also has the ability to add, view, and delete. Now where it really starts changing is on the architects. So on the architect can not view markups, but they have the ability to view them if you like. So we can dial it up or dial it down. And then our subcontractor has no permissions to view markups, but you can also dial them up and dial them down. And then our last but not least, our owner role. This role actually does not have the ability to view markups ever. And you can also modify how cost and join are shown to these particular roles here by checking either this box or this box, without markups or with markups. So depending on how you want your collaborators to see these costs.
Yeah, and Gustav, I'll jump in. This is a question from Dawson, is whether the kind of on-off toggle shows up on the owner's dashboard too. What you can see on Gustav's screen here is the default set of permissions for the owner role. So by default, owners can see everything with markups already allocated and folded in, but they cannot drill down into the markup details behind something. So they wouldn't be able to turn off markups in certain views and see as much detail around direct costs split out from those markups. But any role and join can still be customized from whatever your set of defaults are. So definitely look to see how your project is using permissions for each role, just to make sure that they're following what you'd expect to.
Awesome, great question. Thanks, Dawson. All right, so just to recap everything, that does conclude what I wanted to show you here in Join. So we took a look at our milestone markups, how to apply them with categorization, how they apply to items. Again, reiterating that we have two types of markups that can be percent or lump sum. Percent are inherited by our items, lump sums are not. We can also modify how we reference those markups as well. And all markups that are inherited by items now can be filtered down by categorization. So if you recall, I created a categorization called risk, and I tagged one item with that particular category, which meant that this particular item was filtered over to our items. We also covered how markups are shown throughout Join, and how our collaborators can view and interact with markups in Join. So we do have several questions, so I want to allow for time to get those answered. And let me get our question. And before I actually get off the product, Christina, do you have anything you'd like to add, or any other points around markups?
No, I think there are a few things, but most of them look like we'll cover them throughout Q&A.
Excellent.
I think that's something. I'm going to start with, it looks like we got a few questions just on general markup setup. So I'll start there, and then a few additional questions on the new feature to be able to filter down your markups and apply them to specific work breakdown structures. So the first is, this is from Jake. Can you copy markup sets from one project to another in a similar way to how you showed copying from one milestone to another? And yeah, the answer for that is you can definitely copy markups from one project and then jump into another. Copy paste works just the same as it would from milestone to milestone. You can also do the same thing if you want to carry a set of markups from across a few different items. That's another way to kind of do a similar thing to what Gustav showed in applying a template that applies to all items.
Yeah, and if I could add something, and that's not limited just to markups. One best practice and something I tell users to do sometimes, you can open up two tabs of join, put them side by side, and you can actually transfer over. Say you've created a custom categorization in one project, and you're like, hey, this really applies to this new project. If you have both projects open, you can bring those over really easily with just copy and paste.
Yeah, great. All right, our next question from Elliot is, can you copy and paste from Excel into markups, both the descriptions and the percentages? And very soon you will be able to. So, actually you already can today, is you can copy data that's already in Excel and paste that directly into the markup table. You could do that for your milestone project level markups. You could also do that for your item level markups. And that's something that is new. Up until a couple of weeks ago, you had to manually type in all of your markup information.
Yeah, that was one major feature update that I didn't mention in the webinar. Is if you've noticed, and if you're new to join, you may not have noticed, but our tables are new. They're faster, they're better, they're just quicker, and that ability to be able to copy and paste markups from one milestone to another project is new, and it came from that new table that we've launched. So that is available today.
Great.
Thanks, Elliot.
All right, we have another question from Eric. This, I think, is about the new feature to be able to filter down your markup. I have a project that's pretty big in scope, and we're managing it in 3 separate design phases. So I have some contingencies that are different for each of those stages. How would I set that up?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, similar to what I showed in the demonstration, if your project has different phases or different locations, if your milestone estimate is categorized in that way, then you would be able to do that exact same workflow that I did. So let's say you had 3 different phases and you've tagged your line items in that way. Is that?
Gustav, do you want to jump to the an example milestone view?
Absolutely.
Even show an example of how to set that up?
Yeah, so for example, this particular markup on gymnasium, you could look at it. I mean, this could easily be a phase or a section of your project. And as long as that milestone estimate has that categorization applying to your line items with cost, then you could be very easily filter. So for example, if I wanted to add another one for markups on, let's say cafeteria. And apply that as a percent. And then I could add 3, and then I can go ahead and add that building scope. So you can pretend, let's pretend that this said phase instead of building scope, but essentially that is exactly the same methodology.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and one thing actually on that topic, and if there is an item, if your item is categorized with that particular categorization, with that work breakdown structure, the markups as they are applied will follow through.
Got it. That makes sense. All right, this seems like another follow-up question on a similar concept. This is from Joel. Can I apply a markup filter to 2 separate work breakdown structures? So it seems like this is the same markup, maybe referencing something like master format and uniformat.
Yes. So let's take a look at that. So I've already, let me go into this one. So we've already categorized this with gymnasium, but let's say that we wanted to get very precise and say like, well, this is not just only globally for the gymnasium, but maybe it's all the concrete on the gymnasium needs a markup. So yes, you can do that. And so markup on gymnasium and concrete. Do you have anything else to add on that?
No. That's it. And I think we're running up on time. It looks like there are a couple additional questions. So we can send some follow-ups on those that we didn't get to cover today.
Awesome. Thank you. Before we depart, I want to share a couple additional resources with everyone. If you ever need to start a new project, it's as easy as hitting the new project button on the homepage. And if you ever need any help, feel free to access our help center at success.join.build or send us an email at support@join.build. And if you ever need to reach me, you can reach me at gustav@join.build. We have 2 webinars coming up that I'd like to announce. The first one is a recurring webinar. It is something new we're trying. It's called Office Hours with Gustav at Join. As some of you may or may not know, it's kind of a play on the fact that I teach at the college level currently, and we have customers throughout all different time zones. So instead of calling it a lunch and learn, we're calling it office hours. So beginning in August, we're going to have it, and it's going to be recurring the first Wednesday of every month. It'll be educational, really geared toward new users starting in Join, but we're also going to be sharing a lot of tips and tricks, best practices in a very relaxed and open format. Users could even discuss within each other as well. So we may open it, we will open it up for people to ask each other questions. So kind of a Join users group, if you will. So please join us for that. And that's on August 5th at 12 p.m. on Pacific time. And then we have another webinar. This is a public webinar, meaning it's open to the public. And the topic is reaching cost certainty with Join. So this particular webinar will be on how we can align budget and design to meet owners' expectation, and also use Join to collaborate effectively in real time by using project team feedback. And we're going to share tips for achieving cost certainty on your jobs, and then how the Join technology can help provide transparency and confidence to make those decisions. So keep an eye out for those. Whenever you're interested in knowing about upcoming webinars, we'll typically put them up here in the right corner here. So we have a little notification center that'll tell you if we have a webinar coming up. And with that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be with you and to show you what we're working on. And I also want to thank Christina for helping today and being our very special guest. Thanks, Christina.
Thanks for having me, Gustav. And yeah, the last thing I will add is everything that Gustav showed off for the new feature on being able to filter down your markups and apply them just to specific work breakdown structures. That's all from our latest demo environment, and we'll be releasing that very soon. So you guys should all be seeing a notification as soon as that's ready. We're really excited to roll that out. Thank you so much, Gustav.
Stay safe, everybody. Reach out if you need anything. We're always here for you.